Lewis Hamilton disqualified from the Spanish Grand Prix for his car being under the minimum weight limit. Stay tuned to find out if he'll be stripped of his points and to see the massive fine Ferrari now faces from the FIA. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. In an absolutely earth-shattering development that has left the Formula One world in a state of utter disbelief, Ferrari has found itself at the center of a controversy so severe, so far-reaching, that its ramifications may be felt for the rest of the season, or longer. Following what had initially appeared to be a controlled, tactical and hard-fought performance by Lewis Hamilton during the Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona, the FIA released a comprehensive technical report after the race that sent shockwaves through the paddock. What unfolded next was nothing short of catastrophic for both team and driver. According to the detailed analysis, Hamilton's Ferrari had breached strict fuel regulations, not by an overwhelming margin, but by enough to constitute a serious infraction under the current sporting and technical framework. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The FIA issued a jaw-dropping $1.5 million financial sanction to Ferrari, but that was only the beginning. Every single point Hamilton earned that Sunday was nullified, wiped from the history books, erased, as if his effort had never existed at all. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. The core issue centered on fuel consumption, specifically, that the SF24 driven by Hamilton consumed slightly less fuel than the minimum quantity mandated by the FIA's current standards. At first glance, such a detail may seem negligible. After all, using less fuel sounds like a win, a cleaner, more efficient drive. But in Formula One, a championship where tenths of a second can define careers and every technical component is tightly regulated, fuel usage is not merely a number on a spreadsheet. It's a pillar of the sport's integrity. Regulations stipulate not only how much fuel a car may carry but how it must be used, how it's measured, and when. Every detail is scrutinized to ensure teams are not gaming the system to gain illegal performance benefits by underweighting their cars. Ferrari's explanation was swift. The team pointed toward a sensor calibration discrepancy, suggesting that the measurement systems had incorrectly reported the fuel flow and consumption levels throughout the race. Internal reviews cited possible telemetry errors influenced by circuit-specific variables like altitude pressure fluctuations, temperature inconsistencies, and the energy recovery system's unexpected output behavior, all plausible factors. However, the FIA was unconvinced. After reviewing exhaustive telemetry data, conducting fuel mass flow simulations, and comparing actual versus projected consumption patterns, the investigation concluded that Hamilton's car had run approximately 0.8 kilograms under the required fuel usage threshold. In layman's terms, the car ran lighter than it should have. Not by liters, but by enough mass to make a measurable difference in balance, speed, degradation, and strategic flexibility over 66 laps. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. To the casual fan, that number might seem laughably small. But in a sport as exacting as Formula One, 800 grams of fuel equates to a seismic shift. It changes how the car behaves in high-speed corners, how it distributes load across the tires, and even how the brakes respond over time. A marginally lighter chassis allows for sharper rotation, better entry speed, and crucially, reduced energy consumption over longer stints. In a tightly packed midfield, where Hamilton was fighting tooth and nail for every fraction of performance, that discrepancy, even if unintentional, represented a breach of trust in the regulatory system. The psychological impact on Hamilton himself was instantaneous and profound. He had delivered a race of discipline and consistency, managing tire life under immense pressure, executing overtakes when opportunities presented themselves, keeping his composure while undercut strategies played out around him. Every gear change, every corner exit, every lap time had been part of a calculated pursuit of points that could influence the championship. And yet, because of a technical oversight that occurred outside the cockpit, all of it was gone. His position on the timesheet still existed, but in practical terms, it was meaningless. His classification was rendered void in the only place that mattered, the championship standings. Inside the team, confusion turned quickly into panic. Ferrari's engineers scrambled to verify the data again, hunting for any hint of software bugs or flow meter glitches that could account for the discrepancy. Technicians combed through dozens of race weekend variables, searching for scenarios where energy harvesting may have falsely manipulated consumption readings. But none of it mattered. The stewards had made their determination. The punishment stood. And in one announcement, the race was rewritten. The reaction from rival teams was immediate. While some offered sympathetic nods behind the scenes, others interpreted the event as a damning sign that Ferrari's internal systems still lacked the robustness required to execute consistently under pressure. It wasn't just about the fine, which, while massive, could be absorbed financially, but about the strategic damage inflicted on the team's credibility. In a season where momentum is everything and morale often swings based on minute outcomes, the psychological blow of a driver losing his hard-earned result over a technical lapse was as destructive as any on-track crash. In the media center, chaos erupted. Journalists bombarded officials with questions. Analysts pored over previous races to see if any similar discrepancies had been overlooked, and pundits debated whether the punishment was proportionate. The FIA defended the ruling with cold precision, noting that the rule had existed for years, that all teams were aware of it, and that consistent enforcement was vital to maintaining a level playing field. They emphasized that intent was irrelevant in a sporting context. The rules were binary, met or not met. And in Hamilton's case, the requirement had not been satisfied. Online, fan reaction was seismic. Forums exploded with outrage, empathy, conspiracy theories, and passionate defenses of Hamilton's integrity. Hashtags trended worldwide. Social media platforms lit up with emotional responses from fans who felt robbed, betrayed, and infuriated by the decision. Many argued that punishing the driver for a team error ran contrary to the sport's own ethos. Others warned that if such penalties could be handed down so suddenly, it called into question the reliability of the FIA's oversight and measurement tools. Still others speculated that internal tensions within Ferrari might have led to rushed decision-making or flawed processes, whispers that gained traction as former engineers and insiders weighed in anonymously. For Hamilton, the post-race interviews were awkward and painful. He stood in front of a sea of cameras, wearing a professional expression but clearly hollowed out by the ordeal. He thanked the fans. He acknowledged the team's effort. But he avoided specifics. He knew that dissecting the failure publicly would only amplify the drama. What hurt the most, sources close to the driver said later, wasn't the fine or the loss of points, it was the feeling of helplessness. Of doing everything right on track, only to have it erased by something he never had a chance to influence. Within Ferrari, the aftershocks were immediate. Crisis meetings were held. Strategy protocols were re-examined. Engineers were reassigned. Technical directors faced scrutiny from the board. What had been painted as a successful weekend in Spain quickly devolved into a reputational emergency. Hamilton's loss wasn't just a statistical blip. It was symbolic. A reflection of Ferrari's ongoing battle between old habits and new expectations, between legacy and modernity, between engineering brilliance and procedural reliability. The Spanish Grand Prix, once destined to be remembered for tire tactics and sector battles, now enters the record books as a cautionary tale, a moment where precision slipped, where oversight cracked, and where the sport's smallest measurable metric became the cause of its most emotionally devastating headline. And for Hamilton, the road forward remains as challenging as ever, not because of what he must do behind the wheel, but because of what he can no longer control outside of it. The moment the FIA's announcement filtered through to the Ferrari garage, it didn't register as a minor technicality or a routine post-race development. It detonated like a bomb. What had been a tense but manageable atmosphere instantly descended into full-blown disarray. Engineers whispered frantically over headsets. Team principals exchanged glances heavy with dread, and mechanics paused mid-task as if bracing for the inevitable fallout. The ruling confirmed a mistake, a serious one, and it struck with the force of betrayal. It wasn't an opponent that had sabotaged Lewis Hamilton's race. It was his own side. Hamilton was briefed mere minutes before he was scheduled to fulfill sponsor obligations. A calendar note, a handshake appearance, routine, harmless, forgettable. But nothing about this moment was routine. The instant the words left his engineer's mouth, the temperature around him dropped. His jaw clenched, his hands tightened around his gloves, and without speaking, he pivoted away from the sponsor liaison team and stormed off. No cameras caught what happened next in real time, but those who were there said it unfolded like a scene from a movie, intense, raw, unfiltered. He made a direct line for the Ferrari operations zone. Not the public-facing garage, but the heart of the strategy bunker, the enclosed high-security engineering bay where race decisions are made and the most sensitive telemetry is analyzed in real time. The second he entered, all conversation ceased. No one dared move. With his gloves still in hand, he slammed them onto the main analysis table, hard enough to startle even the most seasoned personnel. The sound cut through the stillness like a blade. Hamilton didn't raise his voice at first. His fury was quiet, focused, almost surgical. He scanned the room, locking eyes with people he had trusted, people who had promised precision, excellence, competence. And then something broke. "How do you allow this to happen?" he demanded, voice rising like a wave ready to crash. "How does a mistake this basic slip through at this level?" The object of his ire quickly became clear: the systems engineers responsible for overseeing fuel flow metrics and live data management. The FIA ruling had made it painfully obvious: something had been overlooked. A misreading, a miscalculation, or worse, a deliberate decision to ignore warning signs. According to multiple internal sources, Hamilton specifically pointed at the real-time analytics team. "You had the data," he shouted. "You saw it. You knew what it meant. And you still let it slide. This isn't a rookie operation. This is Ferrari. You wear red for a reason. Act like it." The clash with Fred Vasseur was even more volcanic. It didn't take long for the team principal to enter the fray, trying to offer explanations. But Hamilton wasn't in the mood for spin or smoothing over. The disagreement escalated rapidly, voices raised, body language heated. Witnesses reported that Vasseur tried to defend the team's decision-making structure, insisting that the situation had been misinterpreted. Hamilton wasn't having it. "Don't insult my intelligence," he snapped. "You don't misinterpret core telemetry. You mismanage it. And now I'm the one paying the price." Technicians stood frozen, trying not to react, not to even breathe too loudly. The argument lasted only a few minutes in real time, but emotionally, it felt like hours. No one dared to interrupt, and no one could look away. Hamilton's fury wasn't theatrical. It was authentic. It wasn't about showmanship or image, it was about trust. Broken trust. He hadn't left Mercedes, his sanctuary of consistency and control, to become part of another chaos machine. He left the debrief before it even began. One final glare, one parting phrase, unconfirmed, but reportedly along the lines of, "If this is your best, we're done before we've even started." And then he disappeared. No change into team attire, no media appearances, no handshake for the fans. He walked straight out of the Ferrari paddock enclave and didn't come back for hours. When he re-emerged, it wasn't at his garage. It wasn't with Ferrari. It was at Mercedes. People spotted him entering the silver motorhome, the one that still carried echoes of his greatest triumphs. There, in the calm, familiar shadows of the team that had defined his legacy, he found the one person who could still meet him at his level: Toto Wolff. The man who had built an empire around him. The man who had always given him freedom, clarity, and belief. What they spoke about remains private, but the image alone was seismic. Hamilton and Wolff. Side by side. No photographers allowed, no PR spin applied. Just two figures of motorsport history reconnecting in a moment of doubt. Was it a strategy meeting? A debrief in exile? A discussion about the future? No one can say. But whatever it was, it sent a clear message: Hamilton may wear red now, but silver is still in his bloodstream. Meanwhile, back in the Ferrari camp, the mood had turned funereal. No one smiled. No one spoke above a whisper. The engineers who had been targeted during the explosion of emotion sat behind monitors, rewatching data feeds in a daze. A scheduled team dinner was cancelled. A pre-approved press release was quietly shelved. Hamilton's absence loomed over everything. And the questions that no one dared to ask publicly began circulating in hushed tones. Did Ferrari underestimate what they were taking on? Did they truly believe Hamilton would fold quietly when things went wrong? Or worse, did they genuinely think he wouldn't notice when the numbers stopped making sense? Because the truth was now on display for the entire paddock, Hamilton may have changed teams, but his expectations had not. And when those expectations were shattered, he didn't internalize it, he unleashed it. This wasn't just about a fuel sensor or a misread data stream. This was about systemic accountability. About a driver who has given 2 decades of his life to Formula One, demanding a standard that so few teams can actually deliver. Hamilton didn't sign with Ferrari to be part of a rebuild. He signed to bring victory. And now, he's starting to suspect that the foundations beneath him aren't ready to support the weight of that ambition. The paddock knows what this kind of explosion means. It's not just frustration. It's foreshadowing. A storm has been set in motion, and its consequences won't be confined to a single race weekend. Not when the most successful driver in F1 history is questioning the competence of his own pit wall. Not when the figurehead of Ferrari's future spends the night in the hospitality suite of his former team. What happens next could reshape the narrative of the entire season. Maybe even the next few years. Because once a driver like Hamilton starts asking himself the big questions, the answers rarely leave the status quo intact. What unfolded in that private, emotionally charged exchange between Lewis Hamilton and Toto Wolff is already pulsing through every corner of the Formula One world, not as gossip, but as a defining tremor shaking the very core of Ferrari's already fragile structure. This wasn't just another post-session debrief overheard through thin motorhome walls. This was a moment, raw, painful, volcanic, that signaled the possible unraveling of a high-stakes alliance that was never meant to break this soon. And while no official transcript has been released, and no microphones were nearby, the contents of the conversation have leaked anyway, passed like contraband through pit crews, engineers, and media insiders who know when the air changes and the walls start to crack. Insiders who were close enough to catch fragments of the emotional eruption report that Hamilton, usually composed, rarely rattled, let everything spill. His tone wasn't measured. It wasn't careful. It was full-bodied fury, the kind that only comes when trust has been broken so fundamentally that recovery seems almost impossible. He allegedly spoke without filter, venting not just about the chaotic decision-making and the poorly communicated penalty in Monaco, but about a broader sense of betrayal. A sense that he had put his faith in a project that promised greatness but was delivering chaos. And in a particularly gut-punching moment, a line now echoing around the garages like a ghost, Hamilton, head in hands, is said to have looked up and told Wolff, "This can't be happening. I came here to fight for world titles, not to manage dysfunction. Mercedes would never have let this happen. Not in a million years." Whether those words were said exactly that way is almost beside the point. What matters is the emotional truth behind them, the visible fracture in Hamilton's belief. The man who left behind a decade of dominance in pursuit of something more meaningful, something legendary, something poetic, is now standing in the ruins of that dream, surrounded by indecision, silence, and mounting disappointment. He didn't just sound angry. He sounded heartbroken. And heartbreak, in Formula One, is as dangerous as any technical failure. Wolff, for his part, didn't deliver a grand retort. There were no dramatic gestures or performative shows of leadership. He didn't try to solve anything right there. What he did was infinitely more powerful. As fans recorded from a distance, zoomed in through fences and barriers, Wolff approached quietly, placed a steady hand on Hamilton's shoulder, and nodded. It was brief, but it said everything. Not "I agree," not "I miss you," not "I told you so," but something deeper: "I still know who you are. I still believe in you. And I'm still here." That silent exchange has already become myth. The video clip, despite its poor resolution and shaky framing, has taken over social media. It's being played on loop, dissected in slow motion, analyzed frame by frame for facial expressions and body language cues. Hamilton's hunched posture, the way his hands pressed into his temples, the resigned slump of a man who has reached the emotional limits of hope. Wolff's calm demeanor, steady eyes, and that hand, reassuring, grounding, perhaps even welcoming. It's no longer just a moment. It's a symbol, a metaphor, a public glimpse into a private fracture that might never fully heal. Inside the Ferrari camp, the consequences are already rippling outward. The team is in panic mode, even if they refuse to show it publicly. Engineers are being reassigned. Internal reviews have turned into interrogations. Department heads are scrambling to justify decisions made in the heat of battle. One well-placed source inside the team confirmed that leadership has demanded a full diagnostic breakdown of not only Monaco but the last 4 race weekends. What went wrong? Who hesitated? Who failed to act? Who ignored the warning signs that were staring them in the face? The answers are ugly. And the atmosphere is turning toxic. This wasn't supposed to happen. Hamilton's arrival was meant to be the ignition point of a renaissance. The dawn of a new era. The moment when Ferrari shed its chaotic past and stepped boldly into the modern data-driven, agile world of race-winning precision. But so far, it feels like the Scuderia is clinging to its reputation while the world races ahead. Hamilton hasn't just been let down by poor strategy calls or inconsistent pit decisions. He's been let down by a system that talks about change but moves like it's afraid of it. And now, He's realizing that the myth of Ferrari may be louder than the reality. That the legend he joined might not be ready to evolve. And in that realization lies the most dangerous part. Because Hamilton, for all his loyalty, is also deeply aware of time. He's aware that legacy has an expiration date. That his final chapter must be written with clarity, purpose, and excellence, not with apologies, delays, and chaos. And as that conversation with Wolff unfolded, as the weight of that truth hung in the air, something in him may have shifted permanently. Not because he's giving up, but because he's running out of reasons to believe this is still salvageable. Around the paddock, everyone feels it. You can see it in the way rival teams glance toward the Ferrari garage. In the way other drivers answer questions about Hamilton with carefully constructed diplomacy. In the way Wolff, since that moment, has remained quiet but observant, watching the Ferrari situation unfold with a knowing gaze of someone who has seen this storm coming from miles away. There is speculation now, not from tabloids, but from credible, connected voices. What happens if this fracture deepens? What if Ferrari can't convince Hamilton that they can truly support him in the way he needs, the way he's earned? Would he walk? Would he return? Could Wolff make the call? Could Mercedes forgive the exit, reopen the door, and rewrite the script? No one knows yet. But the possibility has gone from laughable to plausible to quietly whispered in high-level conversations behind closed doors. This isn't just about a failed strategy. It's about belief. About whether Ferrari can evolve fast enough to meet the standards of a driver who redefined them. And if they can't, if they continue to deliver confusion instead of clarity, hesitation instead of boldness, then what was once a story of redemption may soon become a cautionary tale. The story of how even the greatest drivers can't outdrive a broken machine. And now, the clock is ticking louder. The questions are sharper. The races ahead are no longer just opportunities, they're tests of identity. And what's at stake isn't just points or podiums. It's the future of a partnership that was meant to restore Ferrari's soul. But if nothing changes, if Hamilton keeps staring into a silent radio and a passive pit wall while watching his prime years slip by, then history may remember this not as a glorious comeback, but as a tragic miscalculation. So keep watching. Because the moment Hamilton stops believing Ferrari can catch up to him, not just in speed, but in vision, ambition, and willpower, is the moment everything changes. And after that conversation, after that silence, after that nod, it feels like that moment may already be here. The Barcelona Grand Prix weekend, which had been hyped for weeks as a pivotal turning point in the season, descended into an unprecedented catastrophe that sent shockwaves through the sport and left the Formula One community stunned, outraged, and deeply divided. The combination of miscommunication, technical blunders, and political infighting resulted in what many are now describing as one of the darkest and most emotionally charged moments of Lewis Hamilton's career, all taking place under the glaring spotlight of Ferrari's already immense pressure. This wasn't just a mechanical error or a failed strategy call. This was a complete implosion of trust, structure, and cohesion at the heart of one of Formula One's most historic teams. What unfolded over the course of a single weekend has left Hamilton's title ambitions in tatters. Points that were within reach, points that could have re-energized his pursuit of the championship, vanished in a blur of chaos and indecision. The entire operation, from pit wall to engineering staff, seemed to unravel at the worst possible moment. Hamilton, who delivered one of his most commanding performances of the season during the early sessions, saw his efforts crumble in a storm of internal failures and unresolved tensions that have clearly been bubbling beneath the surface for some time. From the moment Hamilton exited the car on Saturday, it was clear that something had gone terribly wrong. He didn't wave to the fans. He didn't look at the cameras. He marched straight into the back of the garage, helmet still on, gloves thrown to the ground. The look on his face told a story louder than any radio transmission could: disbelief, frustration, and perhaps most strikingly, a deep sense of betrayal. Minutes later, the world would hear what had already unfolded inside the cockpit: a scorching, emotionally charged exchange between Hamilton and Ferrari team principal Frederic Vasseur that exploded across team radio for all to hear. Hamilton's voice cracked with intensity, the usual calmness replaced by disbelief and fury. "This was never part of the plan," he said, his tone raw and unfiltered. "You told me we were building something. You told me we had a vision. And now this." Vasseur's response was vague and unconvincing, filled with hollow reassurances about unexpected system failures and misaligned execution. But Hamilton was no longer in the mood for diplomacy. "It feels deliberate. You knew. Someone knew. You let it happen." His voice trembled not just with anger, but with pain. The kind of pain that only comes when years of trust are shattered in seconds. Though the F1 broadcast censored the final portion of the transmission, it was too late. The world had already heard enough. Online platforms erupted. Hashtags surged within minutes. Analysts and journalists began dissecting every possible detail, from pit stop telemetry to strategy overlays. Fans flooded social media with screenshots, voice analyses, and side-by-side comparisons with Charles Leclerc's session data, demanding answers that Ferrari clearly didn't have, or weren't willing to provide. Behind the scenes, tensions escalated even further. Hamilton reportedly refused to participate in the full post-race debrief, only attending the mandatory FIA media responsibilities before walking away from the team structure entirely. Members of the Ferrari garage were seen avoiding cameras, while senior engineers huddled in frantic meetings. Ferrari's communications department hastily released a statement filled with vague phrases like technical discrepancies and operational challenges, but the ambiguity only fueled more speculation. Then came the most shocking moment of all: Ferrari's internal disciplinary action against Hamilton. The statement, brief but pointed, accused the driver of inappropriate conduct and failure to uphold team principles. Translation: he spoke out. He challenged authority. He dared to demand answers. Rather than taking accountability for a weekend filled with strategic disasters and operational chaos, Ferrari doubled down, turning the blame inward on the man who had delivered them their best qualifying session just one race prior. Sponsors were blindsided. One major commercial partner, who had recently renewed their contract based on the momentum of Hamilton's arrival, reportedly called an emergency meeting with Ferrari's top brass. According to multiple insiders, discussions turned heated, with some backers questioning whether the team was prepared to handle the enormous expectations that come with having a global icon like Lewis Hamilton in red. Others began pressing for internal audits, with rumors of a complete review of decision-making protocols now making rounds across Maranello. Hamilton's silence in the wake of the punishment was deafening. Not a word on social media. No interviews. No cryptic messages. Just total, unnerving quiet. Those who know him best say this is the calm before the storm. The period of reflection that comes before a seismic response, not with words, but with performance, defiance, and unshakable intent. It's the same silence that preceded his 2020 masterclass in Turkey. The same silence that followed the heartbreak of Abu Dhabi 2021. A silence that screams louder than rage ever could. Privately, it's believed Hamilton has begun weighing his options. While still under contract, his team is reportedly reviewing clauses, obligations, and potential exit strategies. The idea of walking away from Ferrari after just one season, once unthinkable, is no longer considered off the table. Not because he fears the challenge, but because he will not tolerate dysfunction dressed up as passion. He came to Ferrari for greatness. For legacy. For the chance to become the only man in history to win titles with 3 different constructors. But what he's found, at least for now, is a structure unprepared for his level of professionalism, intensity, and expectation. Insiders have noted growing friction between Hamilton's inner circle and key Ferrari figures, particularly surrounding the technical direction of the car and communication chains. There have been claims that his feedback has been routinely delayed, misinterpreted, or even dismissed entirely in favor of internal politics. And now, with the breakdown in Barcelona being so public, those fractures have turned into fault lines. The illusion of unity has vanished. What remains is a relationship in crisis. The fans know it. The media sees it. The grid feels it. Ferrari now faces a reckoning unlike anything it has dealt with in the modern hybrid era. This isn't just about pace. It's not just about upgrades, tire strategy, or engine reliability. This is about credibility, identity, integrity. If they cannot rebuild the trust they have so carelessly shattered, they risk not only losing the most decorated driver in history, but also the very soul of their comeback narrative. What happens next could define more than just this season. It could reshape the legacy of both driver and team. And in the quiet corners of the paddock, where the real conversations happen away from microphones, everyone is asking the same question. Was Barcelona just a breaking point, or the beginning of something even more explosive?